what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take some time this morning to walk us through something that we've wanted to initiate in our church for some time, and just kind of walk it through. And what that is I know I particularly have desired for some time that there be an opportunity in church to give along the lines of a Christmas offering, much in line with the idea of, we buy our family members gifts, we buy each other gifts as an expression of our love, and having an opportunity to do that specifically over Christmas time, I think is a good thing for us as a church family. But even more specifically, not just giving because it's Christmas time, but giving on purpose under a certain banner or a certain philosophy. And what we would like to encourage is a gospel Christmas offering. And what I'm going to mean by that, I'm going to lay out here in the moments to follow. So we'd like to institute a Christmas offering for our church and kind of walk through what that means. And we're building it off of the philosophy of Acts chapter 1 and verse 8. And many of you know the passage, but if you want to turn there, you can. In that passage, we read, "But ye shall receive power after that the Holy Ghost has come upon you, and ye shall be witnesses unto me both in Jerusalem and in all Judea and in Samaria and unto the uttermost part of the earth." And what we're recognizing as a church is that as we're walking through Thessalonians, one of the acts of, or one of the identifiers of their growth in Christ is that they were vocal about their faith and that they were sharing their faith with others around them. In Acts chapter 1 and verse 8, as we think through that passage, the idea, if you can think of it as just circles, those smaller circles would have been Jerusalem. And I think many churches operate and understand this in much the same fashion, that Jerusalem is your local area, however broad you define that local area. And that is that we would be witnesses right where we are. So we understand that God has given us not only the call to and the impetus to support the gospel endeavors around the world, which we'll come to in just a moment, but you can give all the money you want to foreign missions and to missions away from where you are. If you're neglecting to do that where you are, you've really missed what God would have for all of us to do. So right here in our little mission field, we recognize as our Jerusalem. Many times we consider that Jerusalem to be really the greater Treasure Valley. But even in the Treasure Valley, there are areas that are outside, still included in the Treasure Valley, that are outside a little bit of what we would know as our local Jerusalem. But the point there is this, that we would follow this model, and in following that model, this is that passage, so that we would be mindfully in this Christmas offering giving so that our gospel endeavors here can go forward in a more strengthened fashion. And what we're going to encourage, I want to lay out here for you and kind of describe that for a moment. So again, our Jerusalem, this local area, our local assembly, you might consider, I don't know where the magic line is. I would say this, we don't typically have people coming from the eastern Boise area. We have people actually coming from everywhere, but let me kind of describe that for a second. We have people coming from Mountain Home. We have people coming from, we've had people coming from Portland. We've had people coming from Ontario, I should say. And then we've had people coming from not only Emmett, but north of Emmett, as far as, often mentioned the Durhams, as far as Ola. And what I have found, and unique to the Valley, is that people are willing to travel, and I don't think it's just unique to the Valley, but people are willing to travel to find a church that they're comfortable with, that they agree with in doctrine and in practice. And part of what we're reflecting over is that if people are coming that far, there really is room for other churches to be planted. That would be sister churches to fellowship. But I get a little ahead of myself and just simply say that our Jerusalem is our local area, and the idea of giving the gospel here is using that offering to help us do a couple things right here. One of those things that we would be looking at doing is that this next year we would like to do another church mass mailer. The last time we did a mass mailer, Derek was largely involved with that, wherever Derek went to. And that, I think, was about $5,000 to do. And we did that when we dedicated our building back in January or December, January of 2017. Now, we had never done that before. And what I would say is this. I would also just note about the mailers. This is just a little bit of extra information. Used to be when I would prepare flyers or things like that, it was just like this one, an invitation, where you would invite somebody to come to a special event. Pastor Phil, made up these cards so that we can invite to the candlelight service. But we also didn't want to look at the mailer just as an invitation to come to church. And even in these, what we've adopted is really every time we're producing something, we want to put the gospel on it as well. So on the back of this candlelight service invitation is I don't know if I'd say abbreviated, but a concise path towards reading what we would call the gospel message, taking you through the various passages and showing the gospel. So in doing the mass mailer, not only would we be getting the gospel into the homes within that radius, but we would be specifically inviting them to our church as well. And what I can say about that, with the number of people moving to the valley, this is a little bit hard to do. Let's take a moment here, and I don't know that there's going to be a lot of hands, but how many of you would say you found out about fellowship by driving by? Was anybody like that here? Okay, if you look through the room, there's a sprinkling of hands, okay? Now, is that the best way for people to know about us? No, it's not. The best way is through the Thessalonian church way, and that is that we invite people. That's the best way. But I'm going to say that there are going to be a lot of people that are in the valley now that don't know that fellowship even exists. And this is one way, not just to tell them that this church exists, but to introduce them to the gospel, and as well as introducing to the gospel, we believe also invite them to a church that is going to be grounded in doctrine. Now, that's our belief, that's our hope. So the mass mailer is a wing of what we're trying to do through that. And I'm going to take some moment here to explain this, and I think it bears some explanation. So when we talk about our offering, our Christmas offering, going towards these things, I'll explain how it's going to happen with all those in just a moment. But again, reaching our Jerusalem, you might wonder about this next one. So we said, first of all, was a mass mailer. That's a very tangible, right now way in which we would like to get the gospel out into our community. You might ask, well, what part does debt reduction have to that? Well, you know that we're now 2 years in our building, and yes, there is something that we owe on our building, and there are people that are monthly giving towards the reduction of our overall principal, or excuse me, our overall loan, our balance. And that's great, and we're thanking the Lord for that. As a matter of fact, I'm going to tell you that we're on target this year already to be at about $100,000 that's been paid off of our principal, and that's great room for rejoicing. All of us should rejoice over that. I'm very excited about what God is doing there. However, why would this be part of what we would call a gospel initiative, Acts 1:8? How is it tied to that? Well, it's going to come up even more in these slides ahead. But the idea is this: the sooner we can get that debt paid off, the sooner that we can be clear of that, the more money we are able then to invest in the gospel initiatives, both locally and geographically abroad. And it just makes sense. It's frankly good stewardship. The sooner we get that paid off, the more freedom we have to give like we were not able to do before. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Somebody might say, well, no, it doesn't. Well, I appreciate that. It's our hope, our goal, to see that as soon as that can be done, it will free us up to do even more. And I'm going to say it again. This is going to come into the Judea, Samaria aspect of this in just a moment. But I really am hopeful that someday that we'll be able to give in very large ways, larger than we've ever done before, especially in the idea of church planting. Because if I can say if there's any number one physical limitation towards church planting, it is the finances that go behind it. And by the way, a lot of people are moving here, right? Let me ask you, for those that were in the valley 5 years ago, are you glad you got in 5 years ago versus today? Yeah, imagine someone who's church planting. Imagine someone trying to start a church. Matter of fact, we've supported church planters in Anacortes, Washington. You know that we've helped those in Winnemucca, Nevada. Guess what they each one are talking about? The finances, the ability to have a place even to meet. So if God can help us to be financially capable and able to be great givers through our church to help those gospel initiatives, it really is getting the gospel forward. For us to do that, part of it is getting rid of our own local debt of paying this building off. And by the way, I'll just say we thank the Lord for what's been done so far and what great progress we're making. So great things are happening. We just want to do what we can to encourage that to move along and do a great job. So Judea and Samaria, well, what's that? Well, we've identified that in two ways. And one way is, again, starting churches or assisting and helping churches right here in our local area. Now, I just want to tell you that there are two churches right now that I can speak to right now that are in our Judea, Samaria, more geographically close to us, two of them that are well nigh closing their doors. And that's more and more the story everywhere you go, that more and more churches are closing their doors. So I think we need to not only be strengthening, but encouraging church planting in the areas around us. And we've mentioned this slide or shown this slide before. This is the idea of a hub church. The hub church, if you want to look at the very center of this, we place this in our valley, what we call our valley. That's what that very central circle is. That would represent fellowship. And from there are churches in these other areas. Now, that's not to say that there are no churches there at all. There are some places where there really aren't. Okay, some on, even in this area, this map, there are some that there are no churches that are anywhere doctrinally where we are as a church. And so we don't have any sister churches that we partner with. And that doesn't mean in every one of these, but certainly in a lot of them. So the idea is that if we can somehow, when I say be a hub church, be positioned in a way that we can more substantially help these other ministries, that's going to be a big deal. And so church planting is a major part of this. So giving towards the Christmas offering would help us focus on how to do this. And then even more tangibly, there are two ways that we're looking at doing this. How many of you remember this lanky dude up here? Okay, many of you may not know him, but this is Brandon Teskey. And he was our first church intern. And the philosophy behind our internships and leadership development is that we would get people that are being trained or need trained in ministry an opportunity to train here, an opportunity to be exposed to ministry here. And the idea being is, for those of you that are here, if you've moved here from any of the coastal states, if you grew up here, if you are a fabric of what is known as the West, you won't get this. But I'm going to tell you that there largely in our eastern part of our country is a fear of coming out here to the flyover west. That fear is just the idea that it is so far removed from everything they know. And there really are people that just think there's nothing out here but sagebrush and tumbleweeds. And that is the truth. There are people who've never been here. They don't know that there are over 700,000 people in this valley alone. They don't know that. They think we've said it many times. They still think that it's just desolate. There's no people. There's no reason to come. Some of that's changing, but even when that's changing, I just want to say this. I've heard this over and over again, that pastors that are looking for associates or churches that are looking for pastors to come are finding it very difficult to find people to come because they're just afraid of the West. They don't want to leave everything they've known behind back east, and they just don't know anybody out here. So our goal is to get them out here, get them trained in ministry, but also expose them to the West. Now, I can guarantee you that Brandon Teskey's life has been influenced by the West, partly because of what you're seeing in that picture. That young lady is from Wyoming, and many of you know her, Katie Best, the daughter of our previous associate pastor. and scheduled to be married December 22nd, 2nd. And I know this, that Brandon actively speaks to this. He says his heart is inclined to ministry largely because of the influence of Fellowship Baptist Church on his life. Secondly, I know that he has said to me personally that he believes that God is not done with him out west. I don't think he would have ever said that had he not gotten out here. Now, I know that we're talking about long-term seed planting, but that's what we're talking about. Now, Pastor Phil is very much that same model. From Kansas, but I don't know how much exposure he's had to this part of the West, but I know that God has inclined his heart to being in the West, and I know that from our own ministry, God may raise people up to serve right here amongst our own people. But I also thank the Lord for people that God brings here, largely through this type of model. And I am also thankful to say, in the internships and the development of future leadership, that there's now two of us that are looking at being involved in training that. When I say two, I don't look at it just being us two, but as far as full-time staff, the both of us get to invest in that next person very specifically. I also want to tell you that we've already been putting out feelers for an intern for this summer. All right? So we've already got a budget line item. We're going to be talking about that as leadership tonight before the service. But we already are intending to bring another intern this next summer, God willing, and God giving us the direction to do so. But there's that, and also part of this has to get beyond the idea stage. So for instance, you can have the idea of trying to help people come west, but unless you actively engage in like an internship and actually put foot to the ground, it just isn't going to happen. And we believe we need to get past the idea stage of church planting. Now, I'm going to say, everybody doesn't know this, but the church has already been involved in, I forget the exact name for it, maybe one of you guys will remember. It's when you go into a church and you help a church who's struggling, and it starts with an R. Revitalization. I always want to say restoration, but it's not. It's a revitalization. There are some churches that may be on the brink of closing, and again, I know two already, that perhaps God can help us engage in a way to get a man there that can help that church go forward. There's that. But there's also a part of us, me in particular, that believes that we need some experience of those who've been down that road before and can help us actually get past the idea stage to the doing stage of planting another church. And that's who these two gentlemen are. This is Marshall Fant, and this is Bruce McAllister. I believe on your right you see Bruce McAllister. He's been here no less than 2 or 3 times, and he has been largely involved in our church being here in the fashion in which we are through his own influence in our ministry. So part of this means that in this gospel Christmas offering, it would help us pay to have these guys come out to doing not only a church planting seminar, but a survey, and to take that next step to actually getting us there. Does that make sense? So that's what we're talking about in the Judea-Samaria. Now, the uttermost part, as you walk through the uttermost part, what does that mean? Well, it is the idea of reaching the world. Now, we haven't done our most recent tally, but what I can tell you is that we're right about $300,000 that's been given to missions since the inception of the church. So $300,000 is right around that has been given to missions in some form or fashion across the world since the church began. It's our hope that God would continue to use us that way. But when we talk about giving to the uttermost parts under the Acts 1:8, what we're really looking at is not just taking on another missionary. Now, obviously, we believe in taking on missionaries, but that's not what this is about. This is about finding a project that we can support and give to that is more closely tied specifically to the gospel endeavor. And we don't know what that is at this point. We're going to be meeting with the deacons again tonight. And let me put it to you this way. I'm going to tell you what it's not. This offering is not, at this point, designed to go to a specific missionary's financial need. I'm going to tell you why. Frankly, if we were to do that, there's not one missionary I could stop at to say, hey, this person has need, that person has need. I have in my briefcase today a letter from one of our missionaries, actually from their agency, that says they are hurting financially. Is there any way their supporting churches can help? We're going to talk about that. We'll engage in that, but that's not what this offering is about. This offering is more specifically about how can we get involved with some type of a gospel initiative, some type of an event that a church or a church plant is doing to help them get that done. And right now we don't know exactly what that is, but we're going to be moving towards that end. Now, how are we going to do it? The logistics of how we're going to do that. So the logistics behind that look like this. And I'm going to explain the philosophy behind this because it's going to take some time. I also know that many of you hearing this for the first time, you might have more questions upon hearing this. But what this looks like is a 50-30-20% in the offering. 50% would go to the first initiative, which involves a couple things. 50% is our Jerusalem. And again, in that we talked about a mass mailer, we talked about debt reduction. The 30% would be the Judea Samaria. Specifically, we know that we're having an intern come next year. We know that we would like to have a church planting survey where we have these two men come and actually help us get to the next step. That would be involved in the 30%. The 20% is to the outermost parts. Now, I'm going to tell you exactly why our philosophy is this way. You don't find these percentages in Acts 1:8. Okay? You also don't find, 33 point, you don't find that either. So how do we come to this? Well, I'm going to tell you both my own experience and why we're here. And it really falls down to the idea that for years, many in church work considered missions only to be what was foreign. And so there are many churches who are bloated in giving to foreign missions, and they haven't taken care of their local Jerusalem. And by not taking care of their local Jerusalem, what's happening is that many churches then find themselves in that place where they have, give a number, whatever it is, 25, 50 missionaries. The church goes through a hiccup, and now they don't have the money to take care of their local budget, to take care of their local Jerusalem, and they've got all these obligations to meet the missionaries that they're supporting, and you find this dilemma. And my point is this: if we don't take care of our Jerusalem, there won't be mission dollars to give. Okay? If we don't take care of what's happening here, and if we're not in a strength position here, it weakens what we can do in foreign missions. Now, I also want you to know something else. This does not represent the giving of our church. The 50, the 30, the 20. We're talking about doing this for our Christmas offering, but this is not what happens in the church. We don't parse out, well, we're giving 50% to this and that percentage to this. We just want whatever we're doing to be able to be hung on the gospel clothesline and make sure that what we're giving actually goes towards the gospel. And we do want to emphasize local, stateside, national church planting, but we're also burdened about foreign missions, as is evidenced by the many projects that we've helped with through the history of the church. But the 50% of this offering would go towards that local area, 30% would go towards Judea and Samaria, and 20% would go to the uttermost parts of the earth in this particular Christmas offering. And the way we want to do that is for the month of December. And that's why we're taking time to explain all this today. We really should have announced it last week, but we want you to know that this is what we hope to do. And how we want to do it is simply this way. There's no time frame on which you have to do this before, what is that Sunday, 22nd or 23rd? 22nd. So even starting next Sunday, let me kind of draw back and say this. Before I explain the offering, let me kind of give you my sense on what we're going to be doing as a family. This offering is not part of what we would consider our tithes or our general offering or giving to this church. Why? Well, we're taking this as an opportunity to give as a special blessing towards the gospel initiative that we're trying to do here. Just like I said earlier, like it would be a gift to a loved one. But instead, it's a gift towards the church for this purpose. So this isn't a part of what our regular giving would be. This would be a special offering. But when are we doing it? Well, you can do it on any Sunday, and you can do it in one of two ways. If you're going to give towards this, you would have to say Christmas offering, either on an envelope or on your check. It would need to say Christmas offering somewhere, or Christmas gift in the memo, something like that. We're also going to leave the plates open after the service. So anything that's in the plates at the end of the service. If you want to give that way, you can. So then the last way is on December 22nd, which is our, we've already had our candlelight service on the 15th. The 22nd is that Sunday before Christmas. So on that Sunday before Christmas, it is the only Sunday that we're going to take a special offering for this. So there will be a second offering on that Sunday at the end of the service. And whatever comes in at that particular offering, we're going to consider that the end of our Christmas offering. Now, having given all this to you, again, the goal there is to let our light shine, let the gospel go forward from our Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, to the uttermost parts of the world. You may have questions beyond this. I'm sorry to take all this time to explain it, except for to say this. If I don't take time to explain it, you won't know what's going on. You can't pray, you can't give intelligently, or even pray about what God would have you do. And I don't know what God's going to do with this. There's one thing that I did not do with this that other churches that do this have. And that is this: I did not set a target. I did not set a goal. Because I don't know what our church is going to do. And I also am not a fan of setting a target that is too much or too little. I just trust God to guide us in what we do. And what is the standard here? What is the standard in all this? Well, the standard is giving as God directs you. And I'm going to be, I hope I can be as clear as I can be about this. The standard behind this offering is really the standard for every offering. And that is, you may not have anything to give. And that's the truth sometimes. But if God blesses and you pray about it and it's something you can do, then praise the Lord, okay? But what I don't want to have, either in the offering that we're going to take now, which is our normal tithes and offering, or in a special Christmas offering, I don't want anybody's arm to feel like you're twisted. And for those that are visiting, maybe here for the first service, to have a pastor talk about this long, you might think, my word, it's all about money. The truth is, God uses our finances in a very specific way for the gospel. And so we only want you to give as God directs. And if you can't, we respect that as well. So that's the Christmas offering. If you have any further questions on it, please see me or Pastor Phil afterwards. And after tonight, you can talk to the deacons as well, because we'll have talked more about it. But specifically, I'd like you to be in prayer about that gospel initiative to the uttermost, because as you saw up here, we don't have that clearly defined yet. What would be that project? So we need your prayers as we start considering that.